normal people become terrified of criminals.
Shots were just fired. Police just came out and told us, and we're headed there right now.
They become terrified of their own government.
Here's a story from Op India. Washington Post and BBC falsely claim the Dublin attacker was not an immigrant. Here is the truth. I love this. They got community noted. The Washington Post tweets, online rumors claimed the perpetrator of a stabbing attack was an immigrant. The BBC found the man was an Irish citizen who had lived in the country for 20 years. Police blamed a lunatic faction driven by a far-right ideology for the riot in Dublin. And then here's the fact check. The man is indeed an immigrant, as he was originally from Algeria. The Washington Post segment appears to conflate citizenship with not being an immigrant, and you can be both. That's amazing.
So are they blaming this on the far right?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Are they saying that he was far right?
Well, so Carl Benjamin actually tweeted out something, an anecdote where someone said an old lady was talking about, Ireland. A guy mentioned going to Ireland. She said, "Did you hear about the riots?" He said, "No." And the woman said it was something having the far right stabbed someone or something like that. This is what the media wants to happen.
Yeah.
That's why they're lying about this person being an immigrant. This is it. Activists, I think it's simply put, many of these media organizations have activists who work there. The reason why the mainstream corporate press is claiming that Geert Wilders and other politicians are far right is because they are actually far left. If the majority of the population is voting for a dude, then that's the median.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Or not necessarily the median, but that is the plurality or the majority. That is where most of the people see their views. So that's not far anything. That is right-leaning, right.
But it seems far to them because they think they are the truth over here on the super far left.
And so
the middle doesn't seem
they lie, cheat, and steal. And this is another element of it. It's laughable. It was clearly an immigrant who did this. We can argue whether or not this single anecdote exemplifies the entire issue of immigration. I don't think so. I think it's a data point, but I do think people are right to be upset when their government refuses to listen to them. And then the media lies just like this to trick people. And some people fall for it.
Well, then you have to put the far right moniker on it so that then you can justify the censorship and everything else that's going to come as a result. We had the woman in the Irish Parliament, was that recently, talking about taking away your rights.
It was in June, yeah.
Yeah, you have your rights. Well, now you got Conor McGregor being investigated for saying we're at war, which, by the way, that's happening here. Mm-hmm. That's happening here in the United States. Douglas Mackey is locked up over a tweet, from 2016. My co-host on Badlands, on SitRep, he had the FBI raid his house 3 weeks after January 6th over a tweet. He was not in D.C. on January 6th.
What was his tweet?
We are at war. This is, and the worst part is in the warrant, if you look it was like a thread. If you look 2 tweets up, he says we're in an information war. Mm-hmm. And because they isolated that one tweet and said we're in a war, rolled up with Bearcats and up armored vehicles at 6 a.m. to wake up the whole neighborhood, threw a flashbang out there, went into his house, raided his house, found that he, they took whatever they want, the FBI. Then they called in the local sheriff, and they arrested him because he had a gun safe with an AR-15 in it. He was a cop. He was a cop in California. Mm-hmm. But because he was, I think he was like temporarily suspended while there was an investigation. I guess he wasn't technically supposed to have that. So he was arrested, and he's still fighting them to this day.
That's insane.
Yes, over a tweet.
Yeah, that happens in the UK all the time. Like, moms have been investigated or arrested, handcuffed in front of their kids for having posted that women aren't men. That's happened repeatedly. You've had a situation recently where a British guy had posted a video talking about all the Palestinian flags like up and down the high street and saying that he doesn't like it. And police showed up and they dragged him off in handcuffs. Mm-hmm. And you had people screaming out to the neighbors, they're taking him in for a tweet. They're taking him in because he doesn't like the flags down the block. Mm-hmm. That's just madness.
Where was that?
That was in the UK. That was in London. That was in London. They've had all those protests and there were all these Palestinian flags. He posted a video on Facebook that was like, what is all this doing here?
What about Tommy Robinson? Did you guys see what happened to him over the past weekend?
He got arrested for no reason.
He's sitting in a cafe eating breakfast, and they come in, they say, you have to leave or else. And it's actually funny because he basically says, okay, pay for my breakfast. And they go, no. And I'm like, I actually kind of think that's a reasonable position. He should not have to leave. Mm-hmm. Tommy should be like, bro, you're gonna have to arrest me. And he kind of did say that, but then eventually he goes, okay, pay me back for my breakfast. And I'm like, he's essentially saying, fine, I'll leave. Give me my money back. And they're like, we won't do it. They won't even do that. I did think it was funny that in the end, Tommy was actually being reasonable to their demands when he didn't have to be. But they said, you are, what do they say? That you're causing you're the potential for alarm or distress.
Yeah, they were.
So therefore, you're not, he's in London. And they said, by order of the City of London, which is, I believe it's separate from London to some degree. It's like in the middle. And it's got different police or something. And they're like, you have to leave or else. And it was an anti-Semitism march. And the police arrested him and pepper sprayed him while he was sitting in a restaurant waiting for his breakfast.
Well, and the articles that came out about it indicated that he was anti-Semitic. And he was at the march, like, opposing anti-Semitism, covering it. And there were some 50 cops or whatever surrounding him to get him out of there. Meanwhile, like, there's been vandalism. There's been people climbing up on statues. There's been all kinds of mayhem. And those people are just let to go by, you know?
Let's talk about how they're going after the memes. So Nate Hockman tweets, the hate speech law that Ireland is preparing to pass is arguably the most radical legislation of its kind we've seen in the West. It criminalizes the mere possession of materials that, quote, are likely to incite violence or hatred. Books, videos, or even memes on your phone. Look at this. This is amazing. Offense of preparing or possessing material likely to incite violence or hatred against persons on account of their protected characteristics. They say, let's see, a subject to subjections, blah, blah, blah. A person shall be guilty. Prepares or possesses material that is likely to incite violence or hatred against a person or group or person on account of their protected characteristics or any of those characteristics with a view to the material being communicated to the public or a section of the public, whether by himself, blah, blah, blah. Prepares or possesses such material with intent to incite violence. We get it. You get it. Being reckless as to whether such violence or hatred is thereby incited. Yes, they're basically saying memes. If you, theoretically, if you have Netflix on your phone, Dave Chappelle made racial jokes. And for that, you're under arrest. I mean, this is it. This is like, part of me is actually excited for this. I'll be honest, because the line can only go so far until it goes off the edge. And then there's no line anymore. So they keep pushing and pushing and pushing, and then it's gone. And everyone's just standing around like, okay, there's no rules anymore. For instance, like this, for instance, basically is saying, if you have on your phone a video of Dave Chappelle doing his stand-up routine where he makes fun of Chinese people, well, that's it. You're going to jail. But this is Netflix. This is like mainstream, international, top-tier comedy. Doesn't matter. In New York, they just banned discrimination. They signed into law discrimination on the basis of weight and height. You know what this means?
Insane, yeah.
This means that a 600-pound morbidly obese person can apply to be, to work for a government position, or let's say Starbucks. And then let's say they apply online. Then the Starbucks says, come in for an interview. Well, that person can't move of their own power. So they have a crane bring them to the Starbucks and they can't get in the building. And then they say, this is discrimination based on my weight and height, that I cannot enter the building for the interview. So Starbucks, all these businesses are going to have to they're going to have to remodel all their stores to have double doors to accommodate the massive and morbidly obese. The line only goes so far until it falls off the edge.
When we look back at architecture, it's going to be a crazy time. That's when the double doors come back. I mean, this is such a disturbing way of phrasing it, because this idea of likely to incite violence or hatred is determined by the government. So what does the government decide is likely? Like, there are all kinds of things I don't like that I'm sure the government is for. And so we know there's automatically a double standard for what materials are okay and what aren't.
All that really matters is culture. When we have the First Amendment in this country, you would still be arrested for obscenity. So like George Carlin, for instance, the 7 words you can't say on TV, he gets arrested for it. Yeah. So even though we have the First Amendment back then, it didn't matter. Our culture did not allow it, regardless of what the Constitution said. So we talk a lot about the Constitution and the rights it guarantees, but let's be honest, they didn't really guarantee a whole lot until we started enforcing them and having the courts rule to enshrine these protections and set this precedent. So when we're looking at these bans, all that really matters, the government will decide whether or not you go to jail. That's it. They're basically, the law should say, we as the government can decide to arrest you for any reason and lock you up if we want. That's basically what the law says.
Did you see that in the no more discriminating against fat people in New York, the person who brought the bill, Sean Abreu, was inspired to bring the bill because he gained weight during COVID and thought people looked at him weird after.
No, really?
No, yes.
So he sued the government on what standing?
He didn't
And how
sue the
much
government.
weight?
He brought the bill. He's a city councilman.
Oh, I see.
He was
I see.
inspired to bring the bill after gaining weight during the pandemic and noticing people didn't treat him the same afterwards. And he said it's also about changing the culture and how we think about weight. When it was,
I love it. It's hilarious.
Yeah, when it was brought up before city council and people were arguing in favor of it, an NYU student said the desks were too small, and this was a reason to not discriminate.
How much weight did this guy gain? I need to know.
Well, I was looking for pictures of him, and he looks pretty normal. And the bill, of course, was backed by the National Association to Advance Fat Acceptance, and the chair
So
of
glad
that
we
group,
have that in this country.
right? The chair of that group said, "This is such a powerful moment for anyone who has ever faced discrimination simply because of the size of their body." Someone else said that they felt pressured to develop an eating disorder, and so this was a reason to bring the.
Is that the same thing as dieting?
I don't
Look.
have any idea.
Didn't New York pass a law or attempt to pass a law like, I don't know, probably 7 or 8 years ago banning like certain size beverages? Like you couldn't
That
get
was Bloomberg. Yeah. No more supersizing.
And how did we go from that to now where we're at with this? That's just
The soda company sued to be like, no, that's discrimination against the size of our cups. You can't do that here.
Well, and also you had Michelle Obama was very like pro fitness, and now isn't she just ableist?
Well, I mean, the pro fitness was like giving
Yeah.
kids like high fructose, like just loaded down like grape sodas and stuff. Well, drinks, juice that was loaded with sugar. I mean, it was pretty awful.
Yeah, the funny thing too is Eric Adams, who backed this bill about, no discriminating against fat people, he's vegan. And he pushed a plant-based diet in New York City schools for Fridays. There's no like meat in Fridays. And my son would be like, 'cause we used to live in Brooklyn, and my son would be like, "Oh, it's Friday. It's going to be terrible lunch today."
There's no meat in school on Fridays?
Yeah, it was a vegan thing. Eric Adams was pushing a plant-based diet.
Wait. So
I
on
went to
Fridays,
Catholic school, we did that.
Right. I'm like, is this a
Catholic school.
Catholic thing?
No, it wasn't. It was an Eric Adams thing.
I think
Because
it's a
for a
Catholic
while
thing.
they were pushing, a lot of places pushed meatless Mondays because they're
Right.
saying if you eat less meat, it's good for the environment and whatever else. But Eric Adams is like sort of an evangelist.
He's a super vegan
because he think
evangelist.
it
He's a
cured
vegan
his
evangelist.
diabetes. He had some very serious health concern and was like, this changed
He
my
wrote a
life.
whole book about how he
Yes.
lost 35 entire pounds.
30. Well, but he shouldn't brag about that. He had an eating disorder. It's different.
He
Well,
clearly had a problem.
he's got his plate pretty full right now. Eric
Right?
Adams now,
What a
like,
mess.
the boomerang of his bill that they used to go after Donald Trump. It literally boomeranged on the very last day, I think it was, came back at him. And I mean, that guy's
Someone's
just in a
demanding
world of
$5
hurt.
million on that.
Yep.
They're investigating him over, allegations he took bad money from Turkey.
Mm-hmm.
The thing about the Turkey, though, is he was heading down to D.C. to give Biden what for on immigration. And he literally had to turn that Acela around and head back to New York
Yeah.
because his campaign person, her home was raided by the FBI.
Yeah.
I don't think that was a coincidence. I've
Eric
gotta
Adams,
say.
who is both has angered the Biden administration by saying we need help and angered every borough around him by busing migrants to them.
Right.
Thanks for watching this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. Hang out with us live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. and become a member over at timcast.com for uncensored, members-only shows exclusive. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all next time.